In order to know how to use diminished chords in a progression, we first need to play a simple major scale. In this case, the C major scale, starting on the C note on the 3rd fret of the A string. And now let's play this same scale, but laid out on one string. This is made easy if you know the spacing between each note. For example, the major scale consists of a whole step, followed by another whole step, then a half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, and finally a half step, or simply whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. Now many of you watching will know that certain triads can be built from each note in the major scale. For example, C, D minor, E minor, F, G, A minor, and B diminished. And if we harmonize these chords one note further, we would end up with a slightly jazzier version of each chord. For example, C major 7, D minor 7, E minor 7, F major 7, G dominant 7, A minor 7, and finally B minor 7 flat 5, more commonly known as half diminished. These chords make up the 7 diatonic chords available in the key of C, and will form the basis for creating chord progressions. But let me show you a very simple way of using diminished chords, or more specifically diminished 7th chords, to connect each of our standard diatonic chords for more interesting harmonic possibilities. Diminished 7th chords are made up of a root, a flat 3rd, a flat 5, and a double flat 7. The 3 most common ways you can play diminished 7th chords on guitar would look like this. If you don't yet know these shapes, then I would recommend skipping back and pausing the video to get each shape under your fingers. However, for the purpose of this lesson, we only need one of the 3 diminished 7th shapes, this being the shape based off of the A string. Now coming back to our C major scale, which we laid out across one string, you will notice spaces in between any 2 notes a whole step apart. And all we now need to do is fill in these spaces with a diminished 7th chord. So for example, if I wanted to go from the 1 chord to the 2 chord, we can now play C sharp diminished 7th as a passing chord to connect both of these in a much more interesting way. Between the 2 and 3 chords, we can now play a diminished 7th chord. As there is only a half step between the 3 chord and the 4 chord, we can't place a diminished 7th between these two. Between the 4 chord and the 5 chord, we can now play an F sharp diminished 7th chord. Between the 5 and 6 chord, we can now place a G sharp diminished 7th. And between the 6 and 7 chords, we can place our final diminished chord, which would be A sharp diminished 7. So here is the sequence of chords all together without any diminished chords. And now with every whole step gap filled in with a diminished 7th chord. Now let's say you had a simple chord progression, such as C, D minor, G7, and C. You could now, for example, approach the D minor chord with a C sharp diminished chord, like this. Now let's try another example, such as F, G, and A minor. And now let's place diminished 7th chords in the spaces between the 4 and 5 chords, so F and G, and also between the 5 and 6 chords, G and A minor. So in a nutshell, fill in the gaps of the major scale with diminished 7th chords, and you will be well on your way to writing far more interesting chord progressions. I hope you enjoyed this lesson, and I'll see you in the next one.